horror fans, happy October once again. I am bored now, once again joined by Rachel McDonald. And with it being October, we are, of course, doing extra horror movie reviews throughout the month. And this is another one of those. And in a way, sort of the start of another sort of small franchise because this is going to be Queen of Spades, The Dark Rite from, I think it's 2015, 2016, around that sort of time. It's a Russian movie, and also because there are a couple of sequels, so there's actually three Queen of Spades movies.
Okay.
So we will definitely do the sequels at a later date because that sort of makes sense, obviously. But this is a Russian movie, as I said, and it feels quite topical because it definitely has sort of echoes of like a Candyman style premise.
This is kind of a Candyman-ish film. Candyman, Bloody Mary. There were a few different horror films it
Mm.
reminded me of, but it starts with a group of teens playing a game in front of a mirror, and the basis of the game is you draw a door and then a set of stairs on the mirror in lipstick, and then say three times, Queen of Spades, appear now. And she's supposed to appear. Now, the urban legend is when she appears in the mirror. So we have the Bloody Mary influence, and she cuts your hair. She cuts your hair. You don't feel it, but you'll see that your hair is cut, and then she kills you. So of course these kids, they dare this. It's three older kids and then a younger kid. So the older kids are about 17, 18, and then a 12-year-old, and they show the opening scene where they get her to summon it because, yeah, let's get the 12-year-old to summon the demon. And then one of the kids dies mysteriously, and the younger girl and the other two are kind of a little bit worried about what's going on. Did they actually summon something? And so the film kind of follows the main little girl. Her name is Anya, and her family. And we have a little bit of a family drama. We learn that her parents are divorced, that it wasn't a nice divorce, that her father left for another woman. And of course, this ends up bringing him back. He comes to investigate. And so we have a little bit of like an investigative movie. It reminded me a little bit of The Ring, kind of like they went to investigate the source of this curse to find out how to break it before it takes the daughter. They do a couple of seances with the kids across the hall. There's some strange going on. And so it's all about finding out exactly who this woman is, why she's coming for Anya, and how do they stop it. So it plays out pretty well. It's not a very long movie. It's only an hour and a half. It's nicely paced. I have to admit, I don't actually watch a lot of foreign films, so this was kind of a new experience for me. Not as I don't like foreign films. It's more just kind of like don't really have the opportunity to. I watch
Yeah.
mostly what's released, so I don't seek them out. So that was an interesting
Okay.
experience for me. But yeah, no, I thought this film played out quite well. I think that the horror elements in this film were quite well done. We'll get to those down the track. It's very atmospheric. The acting's not too bad. Some of the family drama did drag it down a little bit. There are some awkward scenes which we'll talk about shortly, but that's kind of a staple in horror. Horror does unfortunately sometimes veer into the awkward. There's not always great finding the balance between the human drama and the horror elements, but we definitely have a Candyman, Bloody Mary, kind of The Ring feel, an ominous feeling of someone coming to get you. I think they've definitely taken inspiration from the Bloody Mary legend, or whatever the equivalent is in Russia, because as we all know, urban legends, they go around the world. They're pretty universal, so you can see that influence here. But I'm actually curious to like, how did you find this film? Because Keith sent me a link to this film on YouTube. Were you just browsing YouTube and found it, or was it something you'd heard of before?
No, I was listening to another like horror podcast, and I should give it. Well, I forget the actual name, but oh, I think it's called "What Did I Just Watch?" But it's this horror reviewer Sasha did a video where she reviewed all three actually in the same video, and I think she might have reviewed two and then one in another video, something like that. But anyway, she did all three, and I thought, oh, okay, that sounds like one that I've not heard of. Sounds like it could be worth checking out. Movie in this, the third Queen of Spades movie is like only recently come out, so there's 3 of them to catch. But that's how I discovered it, and of course, as soon as I saw it, it's free on YouTube, guys. So of course, you've got to check it out. It's nice and easy. It's not something you have to pay for. It's not something you have to track down. So nice and easy. You can check it out. And the sequel, the first sequel, is also free on YouTube. There was definitely quite strong Ring vibes in this. I did get that from quite a lot of the direction and the style as well, but definitely in some of the stuff they were doing with the plot. And like you, I enjoyed this a fair bit as well. I think, first of all, it's not really the movie I was expecting, because with these movies, and this isn't necessarily a criticism, but I guess because this premise now has been done a lot of times, I guess I was expecting a less serious movie. I sort of thought then it would be a bit more, kind of goofy or whatever, just maybe a little bit on the generic side. And obviously it could still have been like good with that, but I didn't expect it to be. It actually did take the premise seriously and like ran with it, and as he said, sort of some drama with the characters. But I think also sometimes when it is like a foreign movie, I think often that's a good way where you can sort of have a different like take on some of these things and a different spin on it. And I, like you, I really like the direction of the movie, the style of it, and the horror scenes were effective pretty much all the way throughout. There might have been 1 or 2 that weren't so great, but overall, I thought the horror in the movie worked really well, and the style of it, and yeah, just the use of like settings and houses, and there's quite a good like sort of a spooky style house, and good use of sound as well. I sort of remember it in that opening scene, and you get some good sort of creaky like floorboards and stuff like that. So there was a good use of sound, and I thought they cast it quite well. I thought the actors, particularly the younger ones, were pretty good. They felt quite naturalistic as like, well, teens or pre-teens in some cases, and so they were good. I thought the cast did a pretty solid job overall, and yeah, like you, I enjoyed it a fair bit. It was quite a nice surprise in a way.
I have to, I have to admit, I did find the first half a little slow going. I think it took a little bit of time to find its feet. As I mentioned, the family drama part gets a little bit weird. There's a little bit of a weird thing with the dad and the babysitter, where she tries to be a bit flirty with him, or she makes some comment. He asks how old she is, and she makes some comment about, oh, you won't go to jail for me. And it's just like, ew, no, we don't need that at all. So I think the first half stumbles around a little bit, just with it trying to establish everything. But I did find it about the halfway mark, it really started to pick up. Basically, once they'd had the seance and they contacted the ghost, and then they contacted that guy who one of the kids had been texting before, who had experience with the Queen of Spades, and they started to learn her background. And when we find out her background and like who she actually was and why she goes after kids, it gave me a bit of Woman in Black vibes. Have you seen The Woman in Black with Daniel Radcliffe? Oh, okay. Well, it's kind of a similar premise to that, of like a woman who kills kids. Like when she appears, kids die. So it definitely got very intense. So I liked that they built that kind of mythology. I thought that was actually really cool, and obviously that I'm hoping we will go a bit more into that as the series as we go on, because the actual Queen of Spades, her actual background, and the fact that she killed kids when she was alive, and then was buried alive for her crimes, and how they say that she appears all in black with a shaved head, and that's why she's called the Queen of Spades. I thought that was a very cool bit of mythology. I thought that, that they revealed it very well. And I thought that it really added to the atmosphere and the menace of her. And I have to admit, I really did like the few little glimpses we saw of her, like in the mirrors. There's one shot where the dad is reversing in the car and he sees her in the rearview mirror. She was
Yeah.
very spooky. There were some really fun scares in this film. A couple of them were a little predictable, but even with being predictable, they were still fun. I found myself smiling a lot and really getting into the film in the second half when the action started to pick up and we started to have visions of the lady, and the daughter was having, was levitating and having the convulsions and all of that. I thought that really picked up really well. Like when this film concentrated on the horror, it was really strong. I thought it was really, it had a really good grasp on the horror genre, and I thought the direction, like we've said, was fantastic. Really
Yeah,
built atmosphere and tension well.
yeah, definitely. There's some real subtle little shots where it is just a small detail in the background, like you were describing, or like you. I really love that shot on the road with the ghost there, and just like the headlights and the overall shot. There's like the style of this. It's sort of very sort of industrial, and you really get. And also because it is in Russia, and there's quite a lot of scenes with snow, and probably you don't actually get that many horror movies that feature snow, and not as many as like sort of does.
That's true.
And I think it can lead to like a really sort of chilling, distinct sort of feel and look. So I thought, yeah, the landscape of the film was very distinct, and the way that worked into the horror. And I think obviously some of the stuff you're talking about with the little girl, I think that's why it's important to get the casting right, because obviously like her character in particular goes through quite a lot, and there's some pretty intense scenes. So I thought she was good. His name's Anton, this character, who's like he's the father of like the young girl, isn't he? But then
yes,
there's
Anya, yes.
Yeah, then there's this thing with this other girl who's a little bit older, but even so, she's only like a teenager or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's sort of not just, I mean, okay, it's from her point of view, it's a crush. So that's obviously quite realistic. But there's just stuff with him where, because at one point he hurts himself, doesn't he? And she invites him, I think, into her house, which sort of makes it even more like unsettling. And then she's obviously helping him, and as you said, there is this flirtation. And then also later on, and this is at the point where things have really got going and there's all this stuff happening, he actually offers her, I think, his phone number just to say, if you need anything, call me. And obviously that can be, you can sort of read that either way. You can read that as, yeah, that's just him looking out for her. Or you could say, yeah, a bit creepy again. But just to make a point on that side of it, I will defend it a little bit. And the reason I'll defend it is because I think what the film is doing purposely is like playing with your expectations of his character, like maybe because at the start of the film, he definitely does come off as quite shady, and it was definitely in my head that this character not necessarily could be a villain, but could be like someone who you can't really trust, and just is a bit unlikable and not trustworthy. So I actually think the film might have been setting you up to think that. It seems. I mean, it's obviously worth saying he doesn't flirt back with her.
No.
But it's just a little bit weird that he would like accept her help in that way and then go into her house and stuff like that. It sort of is like inappropriate, but that's the way I read it. I think that's intentional on the film's part to make you think, can this guy be trusted? And obviously as the film goes on, you sort of see, yeah, he can actually be trusted. He actually, because for a while there's a bit of drama with him and his wife where there's like issues with them, and but over the course of the film you actually do see that he's a bit more responsible as like a parent and adult, because there's certain things where he doesn't want his younger daughter to like hang out with these other kids. And I think the way he does it is a bit harsh, but also you can understand it just because of what's going on and the whole curse thing. So
No,
I quite like the way they did that with his
I think
character.
you're right because yeah, the vibe I was getting later in the film, like when he gave her their number and stuff, was more kind of like he was looking out for her just as an adult who's looking out for a kid that he happens to know. Like it didn't feel like he was saying, "Oh, here's my number in case you ever want to hook up." It felt more genuine. So I think you're right, but it was like maybe a bit of misdirection because he definitely grew over the course of the film. Because you're right, like when you first meet the dad, he's kind of a dick and you kind of don't like him and you think, oh God, is is he worth like even bringing into the story? But then he grows a lot and you see that he is quite protective of his daughter. He does love his daughter. He does care about other people. He cares about the other kids as well, and he wants them all to be safe. So I think he has quite a nice arc. It's actually interesting. I'd actually almost say that he was the main character of the film, even though he doesn't come into it until about 10-15 minutes in. Once he does, because like he's the one that does the investigating. He's the one that packs them all up and like brings them to his house. At the end, towards the end of the film, they're trying to get rid of the Queen of Spades, and they think that she's gone, but it turns out she's actually possessed the daughter. And when they're trying to get the spirit out of her, he grabs her and he's like, come into me. Like he tries to take the spirit himself, and then you have the other guy and his heroic sacrifice, which FYI, very emotional. Suddenly, like the end of the film felt kind of like The Exorcist, with the little girl being possessed. But then when the other guy who had lost his son to this same girl, when he took the spirit in and he kind of killed himself, I found myself getting very emotional. I thought that scene was done quite well and definitely sold,
So did
his
I.
desperation. Yeah. So I thought that was quite good. And then, of course, at the end of the film, we have the little hook for the sequel, which I thought was very well done. You see, everything's kind of happy. They're having a birthday party, and then a sales girl comes to the door. And earlier in the film, you find out that's right. We need to explain. The spirit has anchored themselves to a ring that Anya is wearing, and they take the ring off her finger and they throw it away. And then this sales girl who turns up at the apartment at the end is wearing the ring, and the father's just like, "Where did you get that? Throw it away." And she just says, "Oh, a man gave it to me." Like that's not dodgy at all. Some dudes just walked up and said, "Here, have a ring." And then you see the father go back inside, and then he looks at the mirror, and as he's looking at the mirror, you see his face shift a little bit, and it's kind of like, oh no. Because as we were getting towards the end of the film, I was like, well, this feels like a complete story. Like, what is the sequel going to do? This feels like everything's kind of been wrapped up nicely. So the fact that they have that little kind of cliffhanger, it's little enough that if they didn't have a sequel, it would just kind of be a cool open end to the film.
Sure.
But it's enough that if they do open up the door.
Which obviously they did. Because it's sort of interesting without knowing really anything about the next film. I do sort of wonder if they will pick up with these characters or if they're going to shift focus, because obviously, like you said, it could just be one of those endings with that woman and the ring, but also it could maybe pick up with her in the next film if it wanted.
Well, funnily enough, when I started watching this, you sent me the link and you're like, hey, watch this film. So I was like, yeah, okay. And I didn't even look up anything I didn't even know what it was. I went into this film completely blind. So I had no expectations. And I was very pleasantly surprised because, it was a fun little film. I wouldn't say it was anything groundbreaking or anything like that, but it was good. I thought it was really solid. It was entertaining. A lot of the scares were really fun. I found some of the scenes were very tense. There was the dream sequence earlier in the film where the dad was dreaming about the girl and he kind of walks out and she's standing there and she's like, that's right. He goes into a room and he's talking to her. And then he comes out of the room and she's standing in the hall next to him and she's like, that's not me. And you just get this moment of like tension of like, oh shit, then who is he talking to? And then you realize it's a dream. And they had a few other sequences later on where I found myself quite tense and quite on the edge of my seat. So I thought it was very effective. And it was actually kind of cool going into it blind and not knowing what to expect.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
because it was similar with me, apart from obviously hearing that review. But Yeah, it definitely turned out to be a different sort of movie than I thought it was going to be, which is nice because then it can like sit along those other, Candyman style film as
Yeah.
something different, and you can sort of watch it as like a contrast, like this is a different take on that kind of thing. So
Mhm.
yeah, like you, I thought it was really effective, and I think as you get into like the back half of the film and it starts to throw more stuff at you, you get obviously all this mythology and this stuff with like the different objects, because that's one of the things that they sort of have to return the objects, don't they, at
Mm.
one point, and that
Yes,
becomes
yes.
a whole thing. But also the exorcism stuff and that guy who's like the expert, and that's obviously one of those tropes that they use a lot in these movies,
Yeah.
where you get this guy later on who happens to know everything, and
Yeah.
he obviously does a lot of the plot exposition in terms of the
Mm.
backstory, and it's sort of thing which can sort of fall down and be quite generic, but they actually handle it pretty well. And
Mm.
and also I thought the effects were pretty good. I thought
Yeah.
pretty solid practical effects. I thought like the main creature looked pretty
Yeah.
impressive. So that's refreshing, and they clearly, I think, for the most part, did use practical effects. So that was refreshing to see as well. I do have one question actually. So it's something I
Okay.
wasn't sure about, but because the older girl, at one point, there's a scene with her in her house where, with
Hmm.
the spirit, where obviously it's dark and the spirit's there, and we sort of cut like the end of that scene, and it's like the spirit's there and does like come at her, but then it doesn't get referenced again, because I've sort of got the impression she got possessed in that scene, but
Oh.
maybe it was just a fake out, because that.
No, but that's an interesting theory that she did possess the older girl. But you don't, I mean, it's an interesting theory, but you don't really see enough later on for there to like say, yes, definitively, that's what happened. But you're right, that scene doesn't really get referenced again, does it? Because she even cuts her hair. Like she finds her hair
Yeah,
cut and she gets freaked out because we mentioned that's one of the things that happens, but they don't really mention why she doesn't kill her or why she would let her go. Like, is she just scaring her or
yeah.
that's definitely an interesting point. Mm.
Because yeah, when they obviously go to the scene later on, because I
Mm.
think there's a bit of drama where they're like worried about her and they're like ringing round or something. But when she obviously shows up later on and the
Mm.
focus switches to the younger girl and like her being at threat, because of that previous scene, I did keep expecting something where, okay, the other girl's possessed, so that's going to
Mm.
be a turn where she like goes after the other girl. But no, they
Yeah.
never did that or never confirmed it. So I was a bit, maybe
Yeah.
that was just a fake out.
Has happened is they needed a reason for the older girl to turn up at the apartment for the finale, and so they decided to
Yeah,
do that and just have her scare her. But unfortunately it doesn't really fit with what we already know about the mythology, which is as soon as she appears and she cuts your hair, you're supposed to die. So I mean, maybe the
yeah,
girl managed to get out of her apartment in time. Maybe she had an object that she threw away or something. I mean, you could definitely theorize, but the fact that we're having to like come up with theories to cover
yeah.
this like indicates that it is a little bit of a plot hole. So yeah, it's definitely a good point that you bring up there. I think, like I said, I think it was more just for script reasons. I think they needed her to end up at the
Mm.
apartment, so this is the easiest way to do it, just scare her into going there. But unfortunately it doesn't quite mix with the rest of the mythology that they've already established.
And I I probably would also go along with you than some of the drama with the characters. I think that is some of the weaker stuff.
Yeah.
So I would probably agree. Then there's definitely a point around about the middle where it maybe drags a bit, or maybe just like I thought it had a pretty good start, especially that first scene with the kids. But
Yeah,
I
that's a
think
good one.
there are definitely scenes maybe that drag a bit, like maybe the drama isn't so good. Like the stuff with him, Anton, and his wife, I didn't really care about that
No,
stuff.
no, me either.
So no.
it it got a little bit better as it went along. Like I started to feel the relationship between him and his daughter a little bit more, and when he was desperate to save her. But it was definitely clunky in the beginning, and I definitely found myself enjoying the film more when it was just focusing on the horror story, when we were focusing on the actual Queen of Spades and that, as opposed to the family drama. So if they do keep these characters for the next movie, maybe they'll get better with building that drama. Maybe because they've already established the characters, maybe they'll build on that characterization. Or maybe, like you said, we'll end up with a completely new set of characters, and hopefully they'll be able to build that a little bit better. But it definitely fell down a bit in the more human drama parts, but the horror was solid enough. And it felt a little bit like a bit of a mashup sometimes. Like I said, there were several different films that it was reminding me of, kind of like it didn't have like its own identity, but it was still a lot of fun. It was just a lot of fun to watch this film. I watched it late at night just on my laptop with my earphones, and definitely had some good atmosphere going. So
yeah, I would say maybe with that stuff, I think maybe the children, the teen characters probably came off a bit more convincing than maybe the adults at times.
Yeah.
I think their stuff was a bit better. But anyway, so yeah, overall, we're both really positive on it. That's obviously Queen of Spades, The Dark Rite, the first of these movies. There is two more that we will review at a later date. But we're about ready to do ratings, I think. So what would you rate it?
7.5, because I think it was really fun. I think it was solid and entertaining, but I didn't think it was anything overly spectacular. I just thought it was like a nice, solid horror film that was entertaining enough without being anything too groundbreaking. And it was a little uneven, a little bit up and down. It took a little bit of time to kind of find itself. So I'd go at 7.5. Nice.
That feels about right. Again, I think there's one or two things, and it's not something which is amazing, so I can't quite go to like an 8, but it's a really strong movie. I think I had a good time with this one, and it was a nice little twist on this kind of movie. Had its own like feel, as you said, sort of different movies, kind of in the plot. It sort of felt like, but the style of it and the horror moments and some decent character moments, at least with the kids. Pretty scary overall, so some good stuff in there. So overall, a strong movie. So yeah, 7.5 sounds about right to me as well. So that's Queen of Spades, The Dark Rite. If you have seen this movie, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe as always, and you can share us out on social media. And also check out Rachel's channel, Rachel McDonald, for film essays. If I remember, I'll put the link in the description. But just look out for Rachel McDonald, type it into YouTube, and it'll be right there. And I know she has some fun stuff's coming up in the next month or so. Some of it might already be up by the time this video comes out.
Very true.
So look out for her stuff as well. And we're going to be doing a lot of fun stuff really over the next month. We're going to be reviewing some horror TV. One we're definitely doing, which we've recorded the first review of, is The Haunting of Hill House, the Netflix reviews, or the Netflix series. So look out for that, reviews of that throughout the month. And obviously continuing on with the Halloween franchise this month in the run-up to Halloween Kills, which is about the middle of the month. So we're sort of building up to that. But lots, and we're talking about various things. We're talking about doing like top 10 videos and different like lists or discussion type videos. And you should hopefully see one or two of those this month as well. So thanks for listening, guys. Let us know your thoughts on the movie in the comments below. Take care and happy October, I should say. October. It won't quite. Take care, guys. See you later.
See ya.
Я у себя в ванной вызывал. Скрип ножниц. Он когда в зеркало смотрел, женщина в черном появилась прямо в зеркале.
Приходил призрак из зеркала. В народе ее прозвали «Пиковая дама».
Дама, приди.
Громче.
Пиковая дама, приди. Пиковая дама, приди.
Я не вижу. Есть слова,